Admiral Jake Morrison stood at the large window of Luna Station and watched the alien ships move through space like dark clouds. The Zephyrian Empire had won the border war 3 months ago, and now they were here to collect their prize. Earth's mighty space fleet was being torn apart piece by piece, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The defeat still burned in his chest like acid. Humanity had fought for 2 years against the Zephyrians, but their technology was just too advanced. Their shields could stop human weapons, and their guns could cut through human armor like paper. When the final battle came at the Titan defense line, the human fleet lasted only 6 hours before Admiral Morrison had to surrender. Now the aliens were taking everything. Morrison watched through the window as Zephyrian work crews swarmed over. The UTS Liberty, once the pride of the human fleet. They were cutting away her weapons, stripping out her computers, and marking her hull for scrap metal. In a few days, she would be nothing but raw materials for alien factories. Captain Lisa Brooks walked up beside him, her boots clicking on the metal floor. She had been his tactical officer during the war, one of the smartest people he knew. Now, she looked tired and angry, just like everyone else who had survived the fighting. "Sir, the aliens finished their list," she said, holding out a data pad. "They're giving us what's left." Morrison took the pad and read through the names. 3 old destroyers that barely worked. A handful of small ships that were already falling apart. And at the bottom of the list, something called the UTS Defiance, marked as a decommissioned mining vessel. "That's it?" Morrison asked. "That's all they're leaving us?" Brooks nodded. "The Zephyrians say these ships are too old and broken to be worth their time. They think we can use them for basic patrol work around Earth." Morrison felt anger rise in his throat, but he pushed it down. Getting angry would not help anyone now. The aliens had made their decision, and humanity had to live with it. But something about the way they dismissed these ships bothered him. The Zephyrians were smart, but they were also proud. Maybe too proud. Commander Ryan Walsh appeared at Morrison's other side. Walsh had been the chief engineer of the flagship. During the war, a man who could fix anything and make it work better than before. His uniform was dirty from crawling through broken ships all morning. "Admiral, I've been looking at that mining ship they mentioned," Walsh said. "The Defiance. She's in bad shape, but her basic structure is solid. Really solid." Morrison turned to look at him. "What do you mean?" Walsh pulled out a small computer and showed Morrison some pictures. The Defiance looked terrible. Her hull was covered in scorch marks and rust. Pipes and cables hung loose from her sides. But as Morrison looked closer, he could see that underneath all the damage, the ship was built strong. "Sir, this isn't just any mining ship," Walsh explained. "She was built to work in the asteroid belt, where space rocks can hit you at high speed. Her frame is made of titanium steel composite, the same stuff we use on battleships. And look at this." Walsh pointed to some numbers on his screen. "Her reactor core puts out twice as much power as it should need for mining work. Someone over-engineered this ship when they built her." Dr. Amy Carter joined their small group by the window. She had been the fleet's top weapons expert before the war ended. Now she spent her days watching the aliens catalog human military technology and decide what to take away. "They're being very thorough," she said, nodding toward the alien work crews. "Every plasma cannon, every particle beam weapon, every smart missile system. They're taking it all back to their ships." Morrison frowned. "What about the kinetic weapons?" Carter smiled for the first time in weeks. "That's the interesting part, sir. They're leaving all of our railguns and magnetic accelerators behind. When I asked one of their supervisors about it, he said those weapons were too primitive to bother with." "Primitive?" Morrison repeated. "That's what he said." Apparently, The Zephyrians think kinetic weapons are outdated technology. They can't understand why humans still use them when energy weapons are so much more advanced. Morrison looked back at the data pad in his hands. The aliens were taking away humanity's best ships and most powerful weapons. But they were leaving behind things they thought were worthless. Old ships, simple weapons, and basic technology that any civilized species should have outgrown long ago. But humans were different from other species. Morrison had learned that during his 30 years in the space fleet, when humans didn't have the best equipment, they found ways to make old equipment work better. When they couldn't afford expensive solutions, they built cheap ones that did the same job. Humans had always been good at making something useful out of nothing. "Show me this mining ship," Morrison said. An hour later, Morrison and his team stood in the cargo bay of the UTS Defiance. The air smelled like metal and oil. Water dripped from broken pipes in the ceiling. The lights flickered every few seconds, and Morrison could hear the ship's reactor making unhealthy noises deep in her belly. But as they walked through the ship, Morrison began to see possibilities. The cargo holds were huge, big enough to hold entire buildings. The corridors were wide and straight, perfect for moving large objects quickly. And everywhere he looked, he saw signs of the ship's hidden strength. "Look at these support beams," Walsh said, running his hand along a thick metal beam that ran along the ceiling. "This ship was built to carry massive loads without breaking apart. And see how everything is connected? The whole structure is designed to distribute stress evenly." They made their way to the engine room, where the ship's reactor hummed behind. Thick shielding. Carter studied the power systems with professional interest. "This is actually impressive," she said. "The power output is enormous for a civilian ship. And look at these conduits. They could carry much more energy than the ship currently uses." Morrison walked to the center of the engine room and looked around. The Defiance was ugly and damaged, but she was also strong and powerful. The aliens had dismissed her as worthless scrap, but Morrison was beginning to see something else entirely. How long would it take to make her spaceworthy? He asked Walsh. Walsh thought for a moment. 6 months, maybe 8. We'd have to replace a lot of systems and fix the hull damage. But sir, even when she's fixed, she'll still be a mining ship. We can't turn her into a warship. Morrison smiled, and for the first time since the surrender, he felt hope growing in his chest. "That's where you're wrong, Commander. We're not going to turn her into a warship." He looked around at his small team, these people who had served with him through the worst defeat in human history. They looked confused, but also curious. They trusted him, and they were ready to follow him anywhere. "We're going to turn her into something the galaxy has never seen before," Morrison continued. "Something that looks harmless on the outside, but carries a surprise inside. The aliens think they know everything about human technology. They think our weapons are primitive and our ships are weak. Maybe it's time we showed them how wrong they are." Brooks stepped closer. "What are you thinking, sir?" Morrison looked up at the massive cargo holds above them, imagining what they could become with the right modifications. "I'm thinking that humans have always been best at building something powerful out of other people's garbage. The Zephyrians gave us scrap metal and broken dreams. Let's see what we can build with them." 6 months after the surrender, the UTS Defiance sat in a civilian shipyard on the edge of the solar system. To anyone watching, she looked like just another old mining ship getting basic repairs. Workers in simple coveralls moved around her hull, welding patches and replacing worn parts. The Galactic Council had approved her registration as a salvage vessel, and their inspectors visited once a month to make sure everything looked normal. What they did not know was that Admiral Morrison had gathered the best minds from the old human fleet. These people worked during the day at regular jobs, but at night they came to the shipyard to build something that had never existed before. Lieutenant Commander Kate Phillips had been the fleet's expert on stealth technology during the war. Now she officially worked as a communications technician for a shipping company. But 3 nights a week, she came to the Defiance to work on sensor systems that could fool any alien scanner. "We can't make her invisible," Phillips explained to Morrison as they stood in what used to be the ship's main cargo hold. "But we can make her look like something completely different." She pointed to a series of devices mounted along the walls. They looked like standard mining equipment, but Morrison knew they were actually sophisticated electronic warfare systems. "These units can change how the ship appears on long-range sensors," Phillips continued. "We can make her look bigger or smaller, faster or slower. We can even make her energy signature match different types of civilian ships." Morrison nodded. The plan was simple but dangerous. The Defiance would hide in plain sight, pretending to be a harmless civilian vessel while carrying the most powerful weapon system humans had ever built. Commander Walsh had been working 18-hour days for months, and it showed. His hair was turning gray, and he had dark circles under his eyes. But when he talked about the modifications to the ship, his voice was filled with excitement. "Admiral, we've gutted the entire mining system," Walsh reported. "All the ore processors, the refinement equipment, the storage tanks. It's all gone." He led Morrison deeper into the ship, through corridors that had been completely rebuilt. Where there used to be machinery for crushing rocks, now there were smooth metal tunnels lined with copper wiring and magnetic coils. "The whole ship is becoming one giant weapon," Walsh explained. "Instead of separate gun turrets, the entire length of the Defiance will be the barrel of a magnetic accelerator." Morrison ran his hand along one of the copper coils. It was warm to the touch, humming with electrical current. "How powerful?" "More powerful than anything that's ever been built," Walsh said. The mining ship's reactor was already producing enormous amounts of energy. "We've modified it to channel all that power into the magnetic field generators. When we fire, the entire ship will become an electromagnetic cannon." Dr. Carter had been busy as well. She had officially retired from military service and now worked as a civilian researcher at a university. But her real work happened in the hidden laboratories aboard the Defiance. "The aliens left us the kinetic weapons because they think they're primitive," Carter said as she showed Morrison her latest designs. "What they don't understand is that we've been improving this technology for decades." She held up what looked like a simple metal rod, about 3 feet long and perfectly smooth. "This is a tungsten penetrator round. It weighs 200 pounds and is designed to maintain its shape even at extreme velocities." Morrison hefted the rod. It was surprisingly heavy for its size. "What makes it special?" "When accelerated through our magnetic system, this projectile will reach speeds that the aliens have never seen," Carter explained. "At those velocities, it carries more kinetic energy than a nuclear weapon. It can punch through any known armor and destroy targets from incredible distances." The work was slow and careful. Every modification had to be disguised so that casual inspectors would not notice anything unusual. The magnetic coils were hidden inside what looked like structural supports. The targeting computers were disguised as navigation systems. Even the loading mechanism for the tungsten rods was camouflaged as a spare parts storage system. Lieutenant Colonel Alex Turner had been a Marine commander during the war. Now he worked as a security consultant, but he spent his free time developing tactical procedures for the new weapon system. "This isn't like any ship that's ever been built," Turner explained to the core team during one of their secret meetings. "Traditional warships fight in formations, using multiple weapons against multiple targets. But the Defiance is different. She's a sniper rifle that can operate in space." Turner showed them tactical simulations he had been running on his personal computer. "One shot maximum effect. We pick our target carefully, fire from long range, and then disappear before anyone knows what happened. The most difficult part of the project was getting the materials they needed without attracting attention. Chief Petty Officer Danny Rodriguez had left the military after the surrender and started a small shipping business. But his real job was running a secret supply network that stretched across human space. "Everything has to look legitimate," Rodriguez explained as he showed Morrison the latest shipment of parts. "When we need magnetic field generators, we order them as mining equipment. When we need targeting computers, we buy them as civilian navigation systems. When we need tungsten rods, we purchase them as industrial materials for construction projects." Rodriguez had contacts everywhere, former military personnel who now worked in civilian industries, business owners who remembered the war and wanted to help, even some aliens who sold human companies materials without asking too many questions. "The key is to spread the orders around," Rodriguez said. "We never buy everything from one place. We use dozens of different companies, all with legitimate reasons for needing these parts." As the months passed, the Defiance was transformed from the inside out. Her external appearance remained that of a worn-out mining ship, complete with fake rust stains and carefully staged damage. But inside, she housed the most advanced kinetic weapon system ever conceived. The magnetic acceleration chamber ran almost the entire length of the ship, from the cargo holds in the front to the engine room in the back. When activated, it would create a series of magnetic fields that would accelerate the tungsten projectiles to incredible speeds. But the weapon was only part of the system. Phillips had developed stealth technology that could make the ship invisible to most sensors. Carter had designed different types of projectiles for different targets. Turner had created tactical procedures that would let them strike without warning and escape without being tracked. The crew was small but highly skilled. 50 former military personnel, all officially working civilian jobs but secretly training to operate the most dangerous ship in human space. They practiced their roles during weekend exercises that looked like routine maintenance work. Morrison often stood on the bridge of the Defiance late at night, looking out at the stars and thinking about what they were building. The bridge looked like the control center of a mining ship, with displays showing ore processing rates and asteroid survey data. But hidden behind false panels were the real controls, weapon systems that could destroy the largest alien warships. Galactic Council's monthly inspections became routine. The alien inspectors would walk through the ship, checking that everything looked normal. They saw mining equipment, civilian crew quarters, and a standard reactor system. They never suspected that they were standing inside the most powerful weapon in the galaxy. 1 year after the project began, Commander Walsh approached Morrison with a smile on his face. "Admiral, she's ready for testing." Morrison looked around the hidden command center, where his team was running final checks on all systems. The magnetic field generators were online. The targeting computers were calibrated. The tungsten projectiles were loaded and ready. The aliens had given humanity their scraps, thinking they were generous. They had no idea that those scraps were about to become their worst nightmare. 2 years after the surrender, the UTS Defiance moved slowly through the outer edge of the solar system. On her official flight plan, she was heading to survey an abandoned asteroid field for valuable minerals. Captain Lisa Brooks sat in the command chair, watching the normal displays that showed mining equipment status and ore processing rates. But her real attention was on the hidden screens that showed weapon systems and targeting data. Admiral Morrison stood behind her, looking calm despite the importance of what they were about to do. Today would be the first test of their secret weapon. After 2 years of careful work, they would finally learn if their impossible project could actually work. The crew of 50 moved through their duties with practiced efficiency. To any outside observer, They looked like civilian miners preparing for a routine survey operation. But every person aboard was a former military officer, and they all knew that this test would determine the future of human independence. Commander Walsh spoke. From the engineering station, his voice steady and professional. Admiral, all magnetic field generators are online and ready. Power levels are within normal ranges. The acceleration chamber is charged and prepared for firing. The target was a large asteroid, about 50 miles away, officially selected for mineral analysis. It was perfect for their needs, big enough to give clear results, but far enough from any shipping lanes that no one would notice what happened to it. Dr. Carter worked at the weapons control station, which looked like a standard geological survey computer. Her fingers moved across controls that appeared to manage rock sampling equipment, but were actually managing the most powerful kinetic weapon ever built. Projectile loaded and secured, Carter reported. Targeting systems have locked onto the asteroid. All safety systems are ready. The projectile was one of Carter's tungsten rods, a simple metal cylinder that weighed 200 pounds. It had no explosives, no complex guidance systems, just dense metal designed to hold together at enormous speeds. When accelerated through the Defiance's magnetic chambers, it would carry more destructive power than most battleship weapons. Lieutenant Colonel Turner monitored the tactical displays from his station. No other ships detected in the area. All sensor networks show normal mining activity. We are clear to proceed. Morrison looked around the bridge at his team. These people had given up normal lives to make this moment possible. They had worked in secret for 2 years, risking everything to build something that might give humanity a chance to stand up to the aliens who had conquered them. This is for all the ships we lost, Morrison said quietly. This is for everyone who died believing that humans could defend themselves. Begin the firing sequence. The ship's reactor deep in her belly began to hum more loudly as power flowed to the magnetic systems. The Defiance had been built to provide enormous amounts of energy for mining operations. But now all that power was being channeled into her hidden weapon. Walsh's voice came over the communication system. Magnetic field generators at full power. Acceleration chamber ready. All systems showing green. Carter's hands moved over her controls with the precision of someone who had practiced this moment 1,000 times. Targeting confirmed. Projectile ready for acceleration. Firing sequence initiated. The tungsten rod sat at the beginning of the acceleration chamber, held in place by magnetic fields. When released, it would be pushed forward by a series of magnetic pulses, each one adding more speed until it reached velocities that no conventional weapon could achieve. Fire, Morrison ordered. The Defiance shuddered slightly as massive amounts of electrical current flowed through her magnetic systems. The tungsten rod began moving forward through the acceleration chamber, gaining speed with each magnetic pulse. In less than 2 seconds, it had traveled the length of the ship and shot out into space at a significant fraction of the speed of light. There was no flash of light, no visible beam, no sound in the vacuum of space. The weapon fired almost silently, with only the brief vibration of the ship's structure to show that anything had happened. To outside observers, the Defiance would appear to be conducting normal mining operations. The tungsten rod crossed the 50 miles to the target asteroid in less than a minute. When it hit, the result was spectacular. The asteroid, which had been over a mile wide, simply disappeared in a brilliant flash of light and expanding debris. The kinetic energy of the impact was enormous, vaporizing rock and metal instantly. Crew watched in amazed silence as the debris cloud expanded outward. Where there had been a solid chunk of rock and metal, now there was only glowing gas and tiny fragments scattered across thousands of miles of space. Dr. Carter was the first to speak, her voice filled with excitement. Perfect impact. The velocity achieved was even higher than our calculations predicted. The energy release was equivalent to a large nuclear weapon. Turner studied the tactical readouts with professional interest. The destruction was complete and instantaneous. No known armor could withstand an impact like that. And there's no radiation signature, no energy beam that enemy sensors could track back to us. Morrison felt a mixture of satisfaction and concern. They had built something incredibly powerful, but power like this came with enormous responsibility. The weapon they had created could destroy the largest alien warships, but it could also start wars that might consume entire star systems. Over the following weeks, the crew conducted more tests with different types of targets. They learned that the weapon could punch through the heaviest known armor, that it could strike targets from enormous distances, and that it left almost no evidence of what had destroyed them. But the Defiance was more than just a single powerful weapon. The mining equipment that they had kept for disguise had been modified into sophisticated manufacturing systems. They could produce new tungsten rods, modify existing projectiles for specific targets, and even create specialized ammunition for different types of missions. Lieutenant Commander Phillips had perfected the stealth systems beyond their original expectations. The Defiance could now masquerade as dozens of different types of civilian vessels. She could appear to be a cargo hauler, a passenger transport, a research ship, or even a small asteroid on long-range sensors. The key is changing not just our electronic signature, but our apparent behavior, Phillips explained during one of their planning sessions. A cargo ship moves differently than a research vessel. A mining ship follows different routes than a passenger transport. We have to act the part completely. Chief Rodriguez had been busy establishing a network of secret supply bases throughout human space. Each base was disguised as a legitimate civilian operation: a mining station, a cargo depot, a fuel processing plant. But hidden within each facility were stockpiles of materials for manufacturing tungsten rods, spare parts for the weapon systems, and fuel for extended operations. We can operate independently for years without returning to any official port, Rodriguez reported. Each supply base can support the ship for months, and they're spread out enough that losing one or two wouldn't affect our operations. The supply network was crucial because the Defiance could not return to normal human ports for maintenance. Too many questions would be asked about the modifications to the ship. Instead, they would have to rely on their hidden bases and the ship's own manufacturing capabilities. Morrison often stood alone in the ship's observation deck, looking out at the stars and thinking about what they had accomplished. They had taken the scraps that the aliens had left them and built something that could challenge the greatest powers in the galaxy. But with that power came the question of how to use it wisely. The test phase was complete. The weapon worked perfectly, the stealth systems were effective, and the supply network was in place. Now they had to wait for the right opportunity to show the galaxy that humanity was not as helpless as everyone believed. 3 years after the border war ended, Admiral Morrison received a message that made his blood run cold. The communication came through secret channels from former intelligence officers who now worked in civilian jobs but still watched the aliens carefully. The news was bad. The Zephyrian Empire was preparing to demand more from humanity. They wanted additional territory, more restrictions on human military activity, and complete control over human space travel. To make sure Earth understood they were serious, they were sending their newest and most powerful warship to deliver the message personally. Morrison stood in the hidden command center of the UTS Defiance, reading the intelligence report for the 3rd time. The ship was called the Hegemony's Fist, and it was the most advanced warship the Zephyrians had ever built. 2 miles long, armed with weapons that could destroy entire cities, and protected by shields that could stop any known attack. Captain Brooks looked over his shoulder at the report. They're not taking any chances this time. The Hegemony's Fist will arrive at Earth in 2 weeks, carrying their High Admiral and a full diplomatic mission. Morrison set down the report and looked around at his core team. These people had spent 3 years building the most powerful weapon in human space, but they had never used it against a real target. Now they had a chance to strike a blow that might change everything. "This is our opportunity," Morrison announced. "The Zephyrians are coming to humiliate humanity again. They think we're helpless, that we have no choice but to accept whatever they demand. Maybe it's time we showed them how wrong they are." Dr. Carter had been studying the technical specifications of the Hegemony's fist for hours. "Their armor is incredible," she said. "Multiple layers of advanced materials that can absorb energy weapons and deflect explosive projectiles. Their shields can stop attacks from entire battle fleets." She paused and looked directly at Morrison. "But they've never faced a kinetic weapon moving at the speeds we can achieve. All their defenses are designed for conventional attacks." "Commander." Walsh was already running calculations on his computer. "The power requirements will push our systems to their limits, but we can do it. One tungsten rod, accelerated to maximum velocity, should be enough to penetrate any armor they have." Lieutenant Colonel Turner spread out tactical charts on the table. "The approach will be the hardest part. The Hegemony's fist will be surrounded by escort ships and protected by sensor networks. We need to get close enough for an accurate shot without being detected." Morrison studied the charts. Earth's orbital space was always busy with civilian traffic. Cargo ships, passenger transports, mining vessels, and research ships moved through the system constantly. The Defiance could blend in with that traffic. Just another unremarkable civilian vessel going about its business. "How close do we need to get?" Morrison asked. Turner pointed to a spot on the chart. "Optimal firing range is here, about 3 million miles from Earth. Close enough for perfect accuracy, far enough that we can escape before anyone realizes what happened." Lieutenant Commander Phillips was already working on the approach plan. "I can get us into the system without raising suspicion. The Defiance is registered as a deep space salvage vessel. We have legitimate reasons to be anywhere in the solar system." She pulled up the ship's false documentation on her computer. "According to our official records, we're returning from a 6-month salvage operation in the asteroid belt. We're scheduled to dock at Luna Station for crew rotation and cargo unloading." The plan was simple but dangerous. The Defiance would enter the Earth system, along with normal civilian traffic. She would follow standard shipping lanes, respond to traffic control requests, and appear to be nothing more than a routine commercial vessel. When she reached optimal firing position, she would engage the Hegemony's fist with a single shot, then immediately begin moving away from the system. Chief Rodriguez had prepared emergency supplies at hidden bases throughout human space. "After the attack, we'll need to disappear completely," he explained. "I've arranged for fuel, food, and spare parts at 12 different locations. We can stay hidden for years if necessary." The journey to Earth took 18 hours. Morrison stood on the bridge, watching the normal displays that showed salvage equipment status and cargo manifests. But his real attention was on the hidden screens that tracked the Hegemony's fist, and her escort fleet. The alien warship was even more impressive in person than in the intelligence reports. She hung in space like a dark mountain, bristling with weapons and sensor arrays. Her escort fleet included 6 heavy cruisers and a dozen smaller ships, all maintaining perfect formation around their flagship. Captain Brooks handled the routine communications with traffic control, speaking in the bored tone of a civilian crew completing a routine mission. "Luna Control, this is salvage vessel Defiance requesting approach clearance for docking Bay 7. Defiance, you are cleared for approach. Maintain current heading and reduce speed to standard orbital velocity." The Defiance moved through the busy space lanes without attracting any attention. Hundreds of other ships were doing exactly the same thing, following traffic control instructions and heading to their assigned destinations. The aliens monitoring the system saw nothing unusual. As they approached optimal firing range, Morrison felt his heart begin to beat faster. 3 years of work had led to this moment. Everything they had built, everything they had risked, would be tested in the next few minutes. Range to target, 2.8 million miles, Turner reported from the tactical station. All escort vessels are maintaining standard formation. The Hegemony's fist is holding steady in diplomatic orbit. Morrison looked around the bridge. At his crew, these people had given up their normal lives to make this moment possible. They had worked in secret, lived with constant danger, and sacrificed everything for the chance to strike back at the aliens who had conquered their world. Load. The projectile, Morrison ordered. Dr. Carter's hands moved across her controls with practiced precision. Deep in the ship's cargo hold, mechanical systems engaged. A tungsten rod weighing 200 pounds was loaded into the beginning of the acceleration chamber. Magnetic field generators throughout the ship began building up massive electrical charges. Projectile loaded and ready, Carter reported. Magnetic systems charging to full power. Target lock confirmed on the Hegemony's fist. Commander Walsh monitored the power systems from his station. Reactor output at maximum safe levels. All magnetic field generators online and ready. We have full power for firing sequence. Morrison took a deep breath. Once they fired, there would be no going back. The attack would change everything between humans and aliens. It might start a war that could consume the entire galaxy. But as he looked at the Hegemony's fist through the bridge windows, Morrison remembered all the human ships that had been destroyed during the border war. He remembered the surrender ceremony, where proud officers had been forced to give up their weapons. He remembered 3 years of watching his people accept scraps and pretend to be grateful. This is for everyone who died believing humans could defend themselves, Morrison said quietly. This is for Earth, fire. The defiance shuddered as every magnetic field generator in the ship activated simultaneously. The tungsten rod accelerated through the chambers, gaining speed with each magnetic pulse. In less than 2 seconds, it was racing toward the target at a significant fraction of the speed of light. The impact was instantaneous. The Hegemony's fist simply vanished in a brilliant flash of vaporized metal and released energy. The kinetic energy was so enormous that the ship's shields and armor provided no protection at all. The debris cloud expanded rapidly, striking several escort vessels and causing massive damage throughout the diplomatic fleet. For a moment, space around Earth was filled with expanding gas and glowing fragments where the most powerful warship in the Zephyrian fleet had been just seconds before. The destruction of the Hegemony's fist sent shockwaves through every alien government in the galaxy. Within hours of the attack, emergency meetings were being held on a dozen different worlds. The Zephyrian Empire's most advanced warship had been completely destroyed by an unknown weapon, leaving no trace of who had fired the shot or where it had come from. Admiral Morrison watched the news reports from a hidden base in the outer colonies. The UTS Defiance had successfully escaped the Earth system and reached one of Chief Rodriguez's secret supply stations. The crew was refueling and resupplying while the galaxy tried to figure out what had happened. The official reports were full of confusion and wild theories. Some alien experts claimed it must have been a secret human superweapon that Earth had, hidden during the surrender. Others suggested that one of the other major powers had decided to challenge Zephyrian dominance. A few even proposed that it might have been an accident, some kind of reactor explosion that had destroyed the ship from inside, but there was no proof of anything. The weapon had struck from such a long distance that no sensors had detected the firing ship. The kinetic projectile had left no radiation signature, no energy trail that could be traced back to its source. The attack had been completely invisible until the moment of impact. Captain Brooks studied the intelligence reports that were filtering in through their secret network. "The Zephyrians are panicking," she told Morrison. "They've recalled their entire diplomatic fleet and put their border forces on high alert. They're demanding that every government in the galaxy help them find whoever destroyed their flagship." The political effects were immediate and dramatic. The Zephyrian Empire had built their power on the belief that their technology was superior to everyone else's. Their ships were supposed to be unbeatable, their weapons unstoppable. The sudden destruction of their newest warship had shattered that image of invincibility other alien governments that had been forced to accept. Zephyrian dominance began to reconsider their positions. If the hegemony's fist could be destroyed so easily, maybe the Zephyrian fleet was not as powerful as everyone had believed. Maybe it was time to stop being afraid of them. Dr. Carter was monitoring alien military communications from her station. Aboard the Defiance. "They're changing their defensive strategies," she reported. "Every major fleet is spreading out their formations and increasing patrol distances. They're all worried about long-range kinetic attacks now." Morrison smiled grimly. The aliens had no idea how the attack had been carried out, so they were preparing for every possible threat. They were wasting enormous resources trying to defend against weapons that might not even exist. But Morrison knew this was only the beginning. The destruction of one ship, even a very important one, would not change the balance of power permanently. The Zephyrian Empire had hundreds of other warships, and they would eventually recover from this shock. If humanity wanted to maintain its new position, they would need more than just the Defiance. Commander Walsh had been working on that problem for months. "Admiral, the construction of the second ship is ahead of schedule," he reported during their weekly planning meeting. "The UTS Retribution should be ready for trials in 6 months." The Retribution was being built in a secret shipyard hidden inside a hollowed-out asteroid. Like the Defiance, she would look like a civilian vessel from the outside while hiding. The most advanced kinetic weapon system humans could build. But she would also incorporate everything they had learned from operating the first ship. Lieutenant Colonel Turner had been developing new tactics for multiple ship operations. "With 2 ships, we can attack from different directions simultaneously," he explained. "Even if the aliens figure out how to detect one of our attacks, they won't be able to stop coordinated strikes from multiple positions." The network was growing beyond just ships. Chief Rodriguez had been recruiting former military personnel throughout human space, offering them jobs with civilian companies that were secretly part of their operation. Engineers, weapons specialists, intelligence officers, and pilots were all finding their way into the hidden fleet. "We have over 300 people now," Rodriguez reported, "all of them working normal jobs during the day, but training with our equipment during their free time. When we need crew members for new ships, we'll have plenty of qualified volunteers." Lieutenant. Commander Phillips had been working on the intelligence side of the operation. "The aliens are starting to treat human diplomats differently," she noted. "Before the attack, they barely bothered to listen to what Earth's representatives had to say. Now they're being much more polite and respectful." The change was subtle but important. The mysterious destruction of the hegemony's fist had reminded every alien government that humans might be more dangerous than they appeared. Even if they could not prove that humans were responsible for the attack, they were not willing to take chances. The Zephyrian Empire had quietly postponed their demands for additional concessions from Earth. Their new diplomatic messages were much more reasonable, focusing on trade agreements and cooperation rather than surrender terms and territorial demands. 3 months after the attack, Morrison received a message that made him smile for the first time in years. The communication came from Earth's government, passed through secure channels by sympathetic officials who suspected that something had changed in humanity's favor. The Galactic Council had formally invited Earth to participate in a new security treaty. For the first time since the border war, humanity was being treated as an equal partner rather than a conquered territory. The aliens wanted human cooperation, not human submission, but Morrison knew the real victory was not political. Recognition. The real victory was that humanity had proven it could defend itself. The scraps that the aliens had left them, the broken ships and primitive weapons they had dismissed as worthless, had been transformed to the most feared military force in the galaxy. The UTS Defiance continued her patrols through human space, officially registered as a mining and salvage vessel, but actually serving as the guardian of human independence. Her crew of former fleet officers maintained their cover as civilian contractors, while secretly operating the most powerful warship ever built. Dr. Carter had begun work on new types of projectiles for different missions. Some were designed to disable ships without destroying them completely. Others could penetrate deep underground to destroy hidden bases. A few were even capable of precise strikes that could eliminate specific targets while leaving surrounding areas undamaged. The galaxy had learned an important lesson about underestimating humanity. The aliens had thought that taking away Earth's best ships and most advanced weapons would leave humans helpless. Instead, they had forced humanity to become more creative, more determined, and ultimately more dangerous than ever before. Morrison often stood on the observation deck of the Defiance, looking out at the stars and thinking about how much had changed. 3 years ago, he had been a defeated admiral, watching alien work crews strip apart the human fleet. Now he commanded a secret force that had changed the balance of power in the entire galaxy. The work was far from over. The Zephyrian Empire still had hundreds of warships, and other alien governments might eventually become threats to human independence. But humanity now had something they had never possessed before: a weapon system that could challenge any enemy, no matter how advanced their technology. Chief Rodriguez summed up the situation perfectly as he watched technicians load new tungsten rods into the Defiance's weapon system. They gave us their scraps and thought we were finished. They forgot that humans have always been best at making something powerful out of nothing. The age of human weakness was over. The galaxy had seen what happened when humanity was pushed too far, and they would not make that mistake again. The Ghost Fleet sailed on through the darkness, invisible guardians ensuring that Earth would never again be forced to accept scraps when they deserved respect.